The autumn rain fell in sheets across the Montana countryside, drumming against the metal roof of Thomas Walker's veterinary clinic. He was just finishing up his paperwork for the day when an unusual light caught his attention through the window. At first, he thought it was lightning, but the purple-tinted glow persisted far too long, pulsing rhythmically in the distance. Thomas pushed his reading glasses up his nose and squinted through the rain-streaked window. After 15 years of treating everything from prize horses to family pets in this rural community, he thought he'd seen it all. But this was different. The light seemed to be coming from the old Reynolds property, abandoned since the previous spring. His natural cautiousness warred with professional instinct, something or someone might need help. After a moment's hesitation, he grabbed his emergency kit and truck keys. The drive through the storm took longer than usual, with his wipers struggling against the downpour. As he approached the property, his headlights caught something that made him slam on the brakes. There, in the middle of the muddy field, lay what appeared to be the wreckage of something metallic and definitely not from Earth. Steam rose from its twisted frame, and that purple glow he'd seen was fading rapidly. But what really caught his attention was the figure struggling to emerge from the wreckage. The being was tall and slender, with iridescent scales covering its body that seemed to shift colors in the rain. It had 4 arms and moved with a grace that seemed impossible for its size. But what struck Thomas most were its eyes, large, intelligent, and filled with unmistakable pain. Thomas's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. Every movie he'd ever seen told him to turn around and call the authorities. But something in those eyes, something about the way the creature cradled one of its arms, spoke to the healer in him. He'd taken an oath to help those in need, and nowhere in that oath did it specify the species. Grabbing his medical kit, he stepped out into the rain. "Hello?" he called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm here to help if you'll let me." The alien's head turned toward him, and Thomas saw its scales ripple in what he hoped was recognition rather than aggression. It made a sound, a series of musical tones that somehow conveyed both pain and relief. "I'm Thomas," he said, slowly approaching with his hands raised. "I'm a doctor, well, a veterinarian actually. I treat injuries." He pointed to his medical kit, then to the alien's injured arm. The creature seemed to understand, or at least recognize his non-threatening stance. It nodded, a surprisingly human gesture, and remained still as Thomas approached. Up close, he could see that what he'd thought was an arm injury was actually a deep gash along its side, just below where its upper right arm joined its torso. "My clinic isn't far," Thomas said, gesturing toward his truck. "It's warm, dry, and I have better equipment there." He mimed walking, then pointed to his vehicle. The alien studied him for a long moment, its large eyes blinking against the rain. Then, to Thomas's amazement, it spoke. The words were heavily accented but recognizable English. "Thank you." Getting the tall alien into his truck was a challenge, but they managed it. As Thomas drove back to his clinic, he couldn't help but glance at his unusual passenger. The being sat quietly, all 4 arms carefully folded, watching the rain-swept landscape with intense interest. "I'm guessing this wasn't a planned landing," Thomas ventured, trying to keep his voice casual despite the surreal situation. The alien turned those remarkable eyes toward him. "Malfunction," it said carefully. "Navigation, damaged. Your world, not intended." "Well, lucky for both of us you landed near someone who's used to keeping secrets," Thomas replied, thinking of all the farmers who'd asked him to treat their animals off the books when they couldn't afford official care. "I'm guessing you'd prefer this stay quiet?" The alien nodded again. "Name?" "Zena," it said, touching its chest with one of its lower arms. "Scientist. Study, life forms." Thomas pulled up to his clinic's back entrance. "Well, Zena, let's get you patched up first, then we can figure out what comes next." As he helped Zena inside, Thomas realized his life had just become infinitely more complicated. But looking at the grateful expression on his alien patient's face, he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. Sometimes the right choice and the safe choice weren't the same thing. The next few hours were a crash course in xenobiology. Thomas discovered that despite the alien appearance, Xena's internal structure had enough similarities to Earth life that he could treat the injury. The scaled skin proved to be both tough and flexible, and the purple blood clotted much like that of Earth creatures. As he worked, Xena's English improved remarkably fast, as if the alien was absorbing the language simply by listening to Thomas talk through his procedures. By the time he finished applying the last bandage, they were having something close to a normal conversation. "Your world," Xena said, testing the movement of the healed arm, "it has such diversity. So many different species living together. This is why I became scientist. To study life in all its forms." Thomas smiled as he packed away his equipment. "Well, you've certainly come to the right place for that. Earth's got more varieties of life than we've even catalogued yet." The storm outside had begun to ease, and the first light of dawn was painting the sky in pale colors. Thomas realized he'd spent the entire night treating his extraterrestrial patient, and strangely, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "You'll need a place to stay while you heal," he said, making a decision that would change both their lives forever. "I've got a spare room above the clinic. It's not much, but it's private." Xena's scales shifted to a warm golden color that Thomas was beginning to associate with positive emotions. "Your kindness, unexpected. My people, they say humans are primitive, dangerous." "Well," Thomas said with a slight smile, "maybe we can both learn something from this accident of fate." As he showed Xena to the spare room, Thomas couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow would bring. But looking at his new alien friend, he knew that sometimes the greatest discoveries in life come not from seeking them out, but from simply being willing to help when help is needed. The following week brought changes to Thomas's life that he never could have imagined. His routine of morning rounds became a delicate balance of treating local livestock while keeping his extraordinary house guest hidden from curious eyes. Xena proved to be not just a quick study of English, but an eager assistant once the initial recovery period passed. "The cellular structure of your Earth animals is fascinating," Xena observed one morning, peering through Thomas's microscope at a blood sample from a sick cow. The alien scales had taken on the deep blue shade that Thomas now recognized as intellectual excitement. Each species has such unique adaptations, yet they share common foundations. Thomas couldn't help but smile at the scientist's enthusiasm. "That's evolution for you. Different solutions to similar problems." He paused, watching as Xena used all four arms to make precise adjustments to the microscope. "Though I have to admit, those extra arms of yours would make surgery a lot easier." Their comfortable routine was interrupted by the sudden arrival of Katie McGrath, Thomas's closest neighbor and the local high school biology teacher. The sound of her truck pulling up sent Xena quickly retreating to the upstairs room, but not before a beaker was accidentally knocked over in the rush. "Thomas?" Katie called out, letting herself in as she had done countless times before. "I brought those reference books you asked for last month." She stopped short, seeing the broken glass on the floor and Thomas's flustered expression. "Everything okay?" "Just a little accident," Thomas said quickly, beginning to clean up the mess. "You know how clumsy I can be before my morning coffee." Katie's sharp eyes took in the scene, the four separate chair imprints around the microscope, the strange metallic device on the counter that definitely wasn't standard veterinary equipment, and the peculiar iridescent residue on the fallen beaker. "Thomas Walker," she said slowly, "I've known you since high school. You're about as clumsy as a mountain lion. What's really going on here?" Before Thomas could respond, a soft musical tone came from upstairs, followed by the distinct sound of something heavy moving. Katie's eyes widened, and Thomas knew the game was up. He had always trusted Katie's judgment. She was one of the few people in town who still taught actual science despite pressure from some parents to water it down. "Katie," he said carefully, "what I'm about to show you, it's going to change everything you think you know about life in the universe. Can I trust you to keep a secret? Katie's expression shifted from suspicion to intense curiosity. You know I can. What have you gotten yourself into? Not what, Thomas corrected, who? He called up the stairs, Zena. I think it's time to meet another friend. The alien scientist descended the stairs with characteristic grace, all four arms held in what Thomas had learned was a peaceful greeting posture. Katie gasped, but to her credit, she didn't scream or run. Instead, she took a step forward, her scientist's mind clearly racing with questions. Greetings, Katie McGrath, Zena said, the scales shifting to a welcoming green hue. Thomas has spoken highly of your knowledge of Earth biology. Katie looked from Zena to Thomas and back again, her shock giving way to amazement. This is incredible. You're actually communicating in English. The implications for convergent evolution alone. She paused, collecting herself. Sorry, the teacher in me got a bit excited there. Your enthusiasm for knowledge mirrors my own, Zena replied, clearly pleased. Perhaps we could exchange information? Your understanding of Earth's ecosystems would be invaluable to my research. Thomas watched as the two scientists, one human, one alien, quickly fell into an animated discussion about comparative biology. Katie's presence turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Not only did she provide Zena with deeper insights into Earth's biosphere, but she also helped create a cover story for the aliens' presence. As far as the town knew, Dr. Thomas Walker was hosting a visiting researcher from abroad who was studying local wildlife. Katie's reputation as a serious academic helped sell the story, and her classroom became a safe place for Zena to examine Earth specimens under the guise of educational demonstrations. But their peaceful arrangement faced its first real test when Billy Cooper's prize bull fell seriously ill. The animal was worth thousands of dollars, and Billy insisted on seeing the treatment himself. Thomas tried to keep him in the waiting room, but the stubborn rancher pushed his way into the treatment area just as Zena was using all four arms to stabilize the massive animal. The silence that followed was deafening. Billy stood frozen in the doorway, his weather-beaten face pale with shock. Thomas felt his heart racing, knowing that everything they'd worked to protect could come crashing down in this moment. To everyone's surprise, it was Zena who broke the tension. Your animal suffers from a simple bacterial infection, the alien said calmly, continuing to hold the bull steady. With proper treatment, he should make a full recovery within days. Billy Cooper blinked several times, looked at Thomas, then back at Zena. Finally, he said, well, long as you can save Old Thunder here, I don't much care if you're from Mars or Manhattan. He paused, then added, but you might want to wear a coat or something when you're out. Folks around here tend to notice things like extra arms. Thomas nearly collapsed with relief, while Katie tried to hide her laughter. As they administered the treatment to the bull, Thomas realized that perhaps he'd underestimated his neighbors. Sometimes the simple wisdom of rural life, focusing on actions rather than appearances, held more tolerance than all the sophisticated philosophies of urban centers. But as they watched Billy drive away with his recovering bull, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that their secret wouldn't stay contained forever. The world was too connected, too monitored, for something this significant to remain hidden indefinitely. The real question was, when the truth finally came out, would humanity as a whole show the same acceptance as a small-town rancher? For now, though, Thomas was content to watch Zena and Katie excitedly discuss the implications of alien veterinary techniques for Earth medicine. In this moment, at least, the future looked bright with possibilities. The first sign of trouble came on an otherwise peaceful Sunday morning. Thomas was checking on Zena's recovered wound when Katie burst into the clinic, her face pale with worry. She was clutching her tablet, hands shaking slightly as she turned it toward them. They know something's here, she said without preamble. The screen showed a local news article about unusual atmospheric readings and unexplained phenomena in their county. More concerning were the comments about government vehicles being spotted on the outskirts of town. The crash site, Thomas realized. We never had a chance to properly conceal it. Zena's scales shifted to a deep purple, a color Thomas had never seen before. My people will also be searching, the alien scientist said quietly. The loss of a research vessel, even a small one, would not go unnoticed. The sound of approaching vehicles cut through their conversation. Through the clinic's windows, they could see 3 black SUVs rolling down the dirt road toward them. Men in dark suits were already stepping out before the vehicles had fully stopped. The back door, Thomas said quickly. Katie, take your truck and create a distraction. Zena and I will make for the old mining trails. Years of navigating the countryside to reach sick animals had given Thomas an intimate knowledge of every back road and hidden path in the area. Katie nodded, her teacher's composure returning. I'll tell them I reported strange lights last week near the reservoir. That should buy you some time. She grabbed Zena's upper arm briefly. Stay safe, my friend. There's still so much we have to learn from each other. As Katie drove off to intercept the agents, Thomas and Zena slipped out through the clinic's rear entrance. They moved quickly through the morning mist, keeping to the tree line that ran behind the property. Thomas carried only a small bag of medical supplies and some food. There hadn't been time for anything else. I'm sorry, Zena said as they made their way deeper into the forest. My presence has disrupted your life, placed you in danger. Thomas shook his head. Don't apologize for bringing wonder into my world. Besides, I made my choice the night I found you, and I stand by it. They traveled through the day, keeping to the most overgrown paths, where the thick canopy would hide them from aerial surveillance. Thomas was grateful for his years of visiting remote farms. Every fork in the trail held a memory that guided their way. As dusk approached, they found shelter in an abandoned ranger station. The small cabin was well hidden and still had some basic amenities. Thomas worked to restore power from the old solar panels while Zena used their advanced knowledge to scan for pursuit. There is something you should know, Zena said as they settled in for the night. My research mission, it wasn't just about studying Earth's biodiversity. The alien scales rippled with complex patterns that Thomas had learned indicated internal conflict. My people have been watching Earth for centuries, Zena continued. We've seen your wars, your technological advancement, your impact on your planet's ecosystems. Some believe humanity is too dangerous to be allowed to develop further. Others see potential in your species' capacity for both destruction and creation. Thomas listened intently as Zena explained how they had been chosen to conduct a deeper study, not just of Earth's wildlife, but of humanity's potential for coexistence with other species. The crash landing had been genuine, but the choice to stay with Thomas rather than signal for immediate rescue had been deliberate. You were studying me, Thomas said, but there was no anger in his voice. Testing how I would react to your presence. At first, yes, Zena admitted. But what began as research became something more. Your compassion, your curiosity, your willingness to risk everything to help a stranger, these are the qualities that give hope to those of us who believe in humanity's potential. Their conversation was interrupted by a distant sound, helicopter rotors cutting through the night air. They quickly doused their small light, but not before Thomas caught sight of Zena's scales turning that same deep purple from earlier. Now he recognized it for what it was, fear. They're not just looking for me, Zena whispered in the darkness. They're looking for evidence of my people's long-term presence on Earth. If they find it, it could trigger a panic, perhaps even hostile actions from your governments. Thomas moved closer to his alien friend, hearing the genuine concern in their voice. Then we'll have to find a way to prevent that. There must be others like Katie and me, people who can understand that we're not alone in the universe, and that's okay. As if in response to his words, Thomas's phone buzzed with a message from Katie. Local radio chatter says they're expanding the search. But you've got more friends than you know. Stay hidden. Help is coming. Thomas showed the message to Zena, whose scales shifted to a more hopeful shade. Perhaps, the alien scientist said, this is the true test, not how one human would react to an alien presence, but how a community chooses to respond when faced with the unknown. They spent the night taking turns watching for search parties, sharing stories of their respective worlds. Thomas learned about Zena's home planet, with its 3 moons and perpetual twilight, while he described Earth's changing seasons and the intricate web of relationships between its species. As dawn approached, bringing with it new dangers and uncertainties, Thomas realized that their friendship had become something larger than themselves. It had become a test case for humanity's readiness to join a larger universal community, and he was determined to prove that we were ready. The morning brought unexpected allies. Billy Cooper's truck pulled up to the ranger station just after sunrise, with Katie in the passenger seat and Billy's teenage daughter Rose in the back. They brought news that changed everything. The whole town's talking, Billy said, unloading supplies from his truck. Not about the government men, but about what you've done for us this past month, document. About the sick animals you've saved, the new treatments you've discovered. He looked directly at Zena. Word gets around in a small town, even when folks pretend not to notice things. Katie stepped forward, her tablet displaying multiple local social media posts. People are connecting the dots. The improved recovery rates, the innovative procedures, the mysterious research visitor. She smiled. But instead of fear, there's gratitude. Protection, even. Rose, who had remained quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. They're setting up roadblocks on all the main highways, she said, her fingers flying over her phone. But the local forums are filled with farmers offering back road access through their properties. Nobody's saying why, exactly, but everyone knows it's to help Dr. Walker and his research assistant. Thomas felt overwhelmed by the show of community support, but Zena's scales had shifted to a color he'd never seen before, a shimmering silver that seemed to pulse with emotion. Your people continue to surprise me, the alien said softly. Where we expected fear, we find acceptance. Where we anticipated hostility, we discover cooperation. Their conversation was interrupted by a new sound, not the threatening thrum of helicopter blades, but a high-pitched tone that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Zena's scales rippled in recognition. My people, they said. They've found us. The sky above the ranger station shimmered, and suddenly there was a ship there, sleek, organic-looking, and impossibly quiet. It hung in the air like a mirage, its surface reflecting the morning sunlight in patterns that hurt the eyes to look at directly. 2 figures descended from the vessel, their forms similar to Zena's but with subtle differences in scale patterns and limb proportions. They touched down with practiced grace, their attention fixed on the unusual group before them. Scientific observer Zena, one of them spoke in perfectly accented English, your experiment has exceeded its parameters. The Council requires your immediate return for debriefing. Ambassador, Zena replied formally, I request permission to present my findings before any action is taken. The situation here is more complex, and more promising, than our initial assessments suggested. The second alien stepped forward, their scales displaying patterns of authority and skepticism. Your prolonged exposure to these humans has compromised your objectivity. Their technological advancement poses a potential threat to galactic stability. No, Thomas found himself speaking up, despite the overwhelming situation. You've got it backwards. Zena hasn't been compromised by staying with us, they've helped us prove something fundamental about humanity. Katie joined in, her teacher's passion evident in her voice. In just 1 month, one small town accepted and protected a being from another world. Not out of fear or obligation, but because Zena showed us kindness and helped our community. Isn't that worth studying? Billy nodded, his weathered face serious. Folks around here judge by actions, not appearances. Your scientist there has saved more livestock, and livelihoods, in a few weeks than most manage in years. That means something. The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted the discussion. Through the trees, they could see the government SUVs approaching along the main road. But before anyone could panic, a convoy of farm trucks and tractors moved into position, completely blocking the access route to the ranger station. The alien ambassadors watched this display with visible interest, their scales shifting through patterns that Xena seemed to find encouraging. "You see?" Xena said to their superiors. "These humans are capable of unity in the face of difference, of choosing cooperation over conflict. My research hasn't been compromised, it's been validated." The first ambassador raised all four arms in what Thomas recognized as a gesture of consideration. "Perhaps," they said slowly, "we have been too quick to judge based on humanity's past actions. Their potential for growth may be greater than our model suggested." "Then let me complete my mission properly," Xena proposed. "Not in secret, but as an official contact. Let this community serve as a test case for open interaction between our species." The second ambassador's scales displayed patterns of deep thought. "The Council will need to be convinced. The risks of premature exposure have already been taken," Thomas interrupted, earning surprised looks from both ambassadors. "And the results are right in front of you. A whole town choosing to protect someone different, not out of fear or obligation, but because they proved themselves a friend." The distant sound of sirens was now joined by raised voices, the townspeople arguing with government agents, buying time without ever directly revealing what they were protecting. The ambassadors conferred in their musical language, their scale patterns shifting rapidly. Finally, they turned back to the group. "We will take your proposal to the Council," the first ambassador announced. "In the meantime, perhaps it is time to address your human authorities directly. If this community can accept us, perhaps their leaders can be made to understand as well." Thomas looked at Xena, seeing hope and friendship reflected in those alien eyes. Whatever came next, they had already proven something important, that fear of difference could be overcome by simple acts of kindness, and that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from studying life, but from living it together. The meeting that changed Earth's history forever took place in Thomas's veterinary clinic, of all places. Government officials sat awkwardly on plastic waiting room chairs while alien ambassadors hovered nearby, their scales shifting with diplomatic patterns. The town's mayor, a practical woman named Ruth Harrison, had insisted on hosting the discussion on neutral ground. "So let me get this straight," said Director Hamilton of the newly formed Extraterrestrial Contact Division. "You've been studying us for centuries, and your first official contact happened because one of your scientists crashed near a veterinarian's office?" "Sometimes the most significant discoveries arise from unplanned events," the first ambassador replied, their scales shimming with what Thomas now recognized as diplomatic amusement. "Your community's response to Xena's presence has provided more valuable data than centuries of distant observation." Thomas watched as Katie unpacked months of carefully documented records, medical breakthroughs, ecological observations, and most importantly, evidence of the town's gradual acceptance and protection of their alien visitor. Each piece of evidence built a compelling case for humanity's readiness for interstellar contact. "The truth is," Billy Cooper spoke up from his corner, "we stopped seeing Xena as an alien pretty quick. Hard to be scared of someone who'll spend all night helping birth a difficult calf, or who gets excited about watching butterflies emerge from their chrysalis." Rose, who had become something of a social media coordinator for the contact event, added, "The younger generation is already adapting to the idea. My latest TikTok about interspecies veterinary practices got 2 million views before the government asked me to take it down." She grinned at the officials. "Sorry about that, by the way." Director Hamilton rubbed his temples. "The cat's out of the bag, so to speak. We've got viral videos, eyewitness accounts, and now official first contact happening in a small-town vet clinic. The question is, where do we go from here?" Xena stepped forward, scales glowing with that now familiar silver sheen of hope. "I propose we build upon what we've already created here. This clinic has become more than a medical facility, it's become a bridge between our worlds. Why not expand upon that foundation? The idea took root quickly. Within hours, plans were being drafted for the Earth's first official interspecies cultural and scientific exchange center. Thomas's clinic would be expanded into a full research facility, combining veterinary medicine with xenobiology. Katie's high school would become a pilot site for educational programs about extraterrestrial life and universal biology. But what about the town? Thomas asked, concerned about how these changes would affect the community that had protected them. Mayor Harrison smiled. "Oh, I think we'll manage. The alien tourism alone will keep our economy booming for the next century. Plus, I've already had 3 farmers offer their land for the new xenobotanical research gardens." The changes came gradually but steadily over the following months. Thomas's clinic gained new wings with equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Xena officially became Earth's first resident alien scientist, with a small team of their own species joining the research staff. The town transformed into a unique blend of rural American life and interstellar scientific hub. But it was the small moments that truly marked the success of their endeavor. Like the afternoon when Thomas found Xena teaching Billy's grandchildren about alien biology, their scales glowing with joy as the children asked endless questions. Or the day Katie's students presented their first xenobiology projects at the state science fair, winning every category. One evening, almost a year after the crash landing, Thomas and Xena stood on the clinic's new observation deck, watching Earth's sunset paint the sky in colors that still fascinated the alien scientist. "Did you ever imagine," Thomas asked, "when you crashed here that night, that it would lead to all this?" Xena's scales rippled with thoughtful patterns. "My people have a saying, the universe's greatest gifts often come disguised as accidents. But what truly surprises me is how your small community showed the way forward for both our species." Below them, the town was hosting its first interstellar cultural festival. Local farmers sold their produce alongside displays of alien technology. Children played games taught by visiting alien scientists, while their parents attended workshops on universal biology. The fear of difference had been replaced by curiosity and cooperation. "You know what the best part is?" Thomas said, watching a group of alien researchers earnestly trying to understand the human concept of a pie-eating contest. "We didn't have to change who we were. We just had to be willing to expand our definition of community." Xena's scales shifted to that beautiful silver color that had become more common over the months. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The path to the stars doesn't require us to abandon who we are, it just asks us to be the best version of ourselves. As night fell, the first stars began to appear in the sky. But now, instead of distant, unreachable points of light, they represented doorways to new friendships and undiscovered possibilities. The universe had become both larger and smaller, larger in its infinite possibilities, but smaller in its growing connections. Thomas looked at his alien friend, remembering that rainy night that had changed everything. "So, ready to teach another generation of rural vets about xenobiology?" Xena's scales danced with all the colors of friendship. "Always, my friend. After all, we're just getting started." And in that moment, under an Earth sky that no longer represented the boundary of human experience, a small-town veterinarian and an alien scientist continued their work of building bridges between worlds, one small act of kindness at a time.